Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 34 of the Hockey Variety Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a while. It's been about 8 days since last podcast. Thank you so much for the support on the last episode. Since that episode, we have seen both conference finals series come to a conclusion. The annual talk of whether or not to touch the conference finals trophy continues, but I will have you know that in this episode, I did a breakdown. I did my research, and I found out if whether or not the superstitions are true about touching the conference finals trophies. More on that later. I'm also going to do a little preview for the Stanley Cup Finals. We see the Florida Panthers moving on to the Stanley Cup Finals to face the Vegas Golden Knights, who took out the Dallas Stars on Monday in a not very or a very anticlimactic game 6-0 butt kicking. Man, that was sad to watch. I'm not gonna lie. I watched about the whole third, and it was in Dallas, and it's just like, oh man. But hey, I gotta give some props to the Dallas Stars fans. They gave their team a standing ovation after the game was over, and I know that's like kind of expected, but I don't know. I thought the Dallas fans were pretty good sports in game 6 there, considering their team was getting their butt kicked. Like, if I paid a bunch of money to go see a playoff game, if it was my favorite team in the home barn, like, I'm not leaving the rink for anything. Like, if I'm paying that kind of money to watch a playoff game, I'm watching the whole dang thing. Even if my San Jose Sharks are down, if they're down like 10-0, like I'm staying. I'm staying. So, yeah, it's probably gonna be a pretty short episode. I know I say that every episode, but I really don't have too much packed in here. It's been a really busy last few weeks. It's just gonna be busy for the next few weeks, and then summer comes around, and things kind of chill out a little bit for me. So yeah, podcast will probably be a bit spotty over the next few weeks, but yeah, here I am. Okay, let's get into the Stanley Cup Finals preview. Okay, so I just got the leading scores there up on the screen. We got the Vegas Golden Knights first in the Pacific. I believe they were first in the West as well going into the playoffs. And then the Florida Panthers, second wild card in the East. Everyone says they only made the playoffs because, Pittsburgh choked. And yeah, something to that, I guess. The Florida Panthers, I think they were only in a playoff spot about 28% of the season, which I believe is even less than St. Louis when they won their Stanley Cup. So, yeah, but keep in mind, this is a team that won the President's Trophy last year. It's not like this is a team that's totally out of the blue, but I think we forget that these guys had a bit of regular season success, considering, there's so many good teams in the league right now, right? I mean, even this year, people were giving Toronto a chance at winning the Cup. I know they do every year, but yeah, not gonna have any Toronto talk in this podcast either, or this playoffs, I guess. But yeah, I know there's a lot going on in Toronto land, but a lot of it's just kind of like the same old blah blah blah. Kyle Dubas being named president of Pittsburgh, and they're still not gonna leave him alone, probably, but whatever. Okay, so Stanley Cup Final preview here. So just out of the West, we got the Vegas Golden Knights. Their leading scores, we got Jack Eichel, 6 goals, 12 assists, 18 points through however many games. I wish I took note of that, but, probably about 18-ish games. So, point a game player. Jonathan Marchessault, 9 goals, 8 assists, 17 points, I believe. No, he does not lead the team in goals because William Karlsson does. I think he has 10. Ivan Barbashev, the trade deadline acquisition, he's been great. 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. Same with Mark Stone. 6 goals, 9 assists, 12 points. So, yeah, lots of guys on Vegas up or near a point per game. I kind of think they're depending on their top 2 lines a little bit. But, hey, those that third and fourth line looked really good in Game 6 against Dallas. So, maybe they can bring some of that magic. Adin Hill, 937. One thing that's cool about these Stanley Cup Finals is the 2 best goalies in the playoffs of a certain sample size, let's say at least 5-6 games played. The 2 best goalies in the playoffs so far are actually the two goalies in the Stanley Cup Finals, which I think is pretty great. So you have Adin Hill, who is essentially Vegas's number 5 when you consider Robin Lehner. I guess he's number 4, number 5. They went pretty far down the goalie depth to get to the point where it's Adin Hill, and here he is. Yeah, 937. He's looking great. And then you got Sergei Bobrovsky, who is sitting at a 935 save percentage. He's also been fantastic. He's been the talk of the town. He's played a few more games than Adin Hill has. So yeah. Yeah, I knew I had his name spelled wrong there. So yeah, Adin Hill looking great. I also have his goals saved above expected over 60 minutes, so that's like a full game, let's say, for a goaltender. And his goal saved above expected is 0.631, which tells me he gives his team about an extra half a goal of a difference in any given game, which, it's a little bit underwhelming. I mean, to be honest, he's been good enough, and I think that save percentage might be a bit inflated by a really good defense and also good defensive forwards on Vegas as well, just allowing very few chances to help him out. But he's been really good. I don't want to take too much away from him, but I feel like Bobrovsky's been a bigger difference maker than Adin Hill has been. But we've seen in previous years, like we've seen with Chicago in 2010 always comes to mind, where you kind of just need a goalie that's good enough sometimes. And maybe this will be one of those years. We'll see. I don't think necessarily that's going to be the case this year, but that could be it. In terms of players to watch, or a player to watch, I wanted to pick one from each team, one guy that's kind of, impressing me. And I think, William Karlsson's been on a lot of people's list for, I think he gets talked about enough for sure, but he's been responsible for shutting down the other team's top lines. Sorry. And I already said he had 10 goals in the playoffs, which leads the team. So he's putting up goals, shutting down the top lines. He's been fantastic, really. I don't know if Vegas would be where they're at if it weren't for William Karlsson, personally. But yeah, he's been fantastic in these playoffs. And it kind of looks like he's getting better as he goes as well. So on the Florida side of things, no surprise here. You got Matthew Tkachuk leading the team in points. 9 goals, 12 assists, 21 points, and he had 3 game winners in that series against Carolina. He was fantastic. He was clutch. He had that big goal to wrap up game 4. I knew they were gonna score. I was like, this isn't going to overtime. They're gonna get one in there. Carter Verhaeghe's also been fantastic. 6 goals, 9 assists, 15 points. Barkov, who has 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points. And since Vegas and Dallas are just kind of duking it out here for a few extra games, this gave the Florida Panthers even more rest. I mean, the Stanley Cup Finals doesn't even start till Saturday. And, Barkov, I think he might have missed a game or two due to injury in the playoffs. This extended break has given them the opportunity for him to basically rest up. And I can only see that as a good thing. I really don't believe in the whole, having momentum going into the next round sort of things. I mean, rest is rest. And, at this point in the playoffs, rest is huge. It really is. So, yeah, I think that is an advantage for Florida. And plus, Vegas is going to get a bit of a rest, too. I mean, it's still 5 days off between Game 6 against Dallas and the Stanley Cup Finals. So both teams should be pretty well rested, but Florida got a little bit more, and I think they needed that. As I mentioned, Sergei Bobrovsky's been fantastic. 935. And get this, he has a goal saved above expected for over 60 minutes of 1.31. So that's over a goal per game that he's prevented statistically. He's been, I think, a much bigger difference maker than Adin Hill has been. Adin Hill's been good enough. Sergei Bobrovsky, I think, has been their MVP. He's been their guy. And I know Matthew Tkachuk's there too, and they have a fantastic supporting cast. I was talking about guys like Stahl, the Stahl brothers and Lombard last episode. But Bobrovsky's been the guy, and in terms of the offense and just, pissing people off, Matthew Tkachuk's been the guy too. So, yeah, but a player I want to highlight, and I looked at the advanced stats, and I was like, this guy has to be pretty good. And in the advanced stats, he's been okay, but this guy Eetu Luosterainen, third liner on Florida. Every time I watch Florida game, this guy just stands out to me. I feel like he is just really good at keeping the puck in the other team's zone. Like, not necessarily, creating opportunities, but just keeping the puck out of his net, and just fantastic on the forecheck. That third line, centered by Lindell, like fantastic line defensively, I thought. And Luosterainen, he's just a guy that stands out to me. Maybe it's just because I like his name. I like me some Finnish names, but he's been really, really good, I thought. And you just kind of have to watch the Florida games to see the difference this guy makes. I could see him scoring a big goal in the finals. Feel free to quote me on that. So, who do I think's gonna win? I bet against these guys every single round, but I'm going Panthers. I'm going in 5. I know that sounds crazy, but I don't know. I have a feeling this isn't going to go to like 7 or something. Now, in terms of like my work hockey pool, because I need to kind of have a bit of a Hail Mary here to make up some ground in the points based on the point scoring system we have. So I said Vegas in 4 on my work pool, but to be honest, I really think this is going to be, sorry, not Vegas in 4, sorry, Panthers in 4. But realistically, I think it's going to be Panthers in 5, maybe 6. 7 would be great. I mean, as a guy who's not a fan of either team, though I'm definitely rooting for Florida. And I am happy that we have 2 teams in the Cup finals that have never won the Cup before. I think that's very good for the game. And I love seeing that. I'm sick of seeing the same teams over and over again. So it's going to be nice seeing one of these 2 teams win their first Stanley Cup. As a Sharks fan, I definitely hope it's not Vegas, but I'm okay with Vegas. I would have rather had Vegas than Dallas, to be honest, because I don't know. But I'm taking the Panthers. The Panthers look like a better team overall. They're exciting. Now, they're not going to have home ice. We'll see if that makes a difference. Or they won't have home ice until games 3 and 4, and then game 6 if it gets to that point. But just watching how each of these 2 teams play, they play quite a different style too, I've noticed. But yeah, I think we're just going to have to wait and see. But I think the depth on Florida is going to kind of outmatch the depth that we see on Vegas. And I think in terms of the goaltending duel, I mean, I know Hill's been great, but I just got a feeling he's just, I don't know. I just feel like he's not going to get the job done. I kind of feel like his luck might wear out if Florida creates enough scoring chances. But it's going to be close. I could see this going Vegas' way too. Don't get me wrong. These are 2 very good teams. I'm pretty happy the playoffs worked the way it did, to be honest. Everyone's brackets busted, of course. But these are 2 very good teams in the finals. And it should be an excellent Stanley Cup finals. I'm going to be glued to my TV the entire time. My fiance knows this. She's going to have to put up with it. Whatever. I mean, we've just been watching like The Office every night, waiting for the finals anyways, but she's a good sport. She pretends to care, and she knows the Stanley Cup's really important, so I really definitely appreciate her letting me watch that. But yeah, so anyways, Panthers in 5, that's my prediction. I'm gonna prepare for that to be totally wrong. All right, here is the thing I really want to talk about. And yeah, it's going to be the last little segment of today's podcast, but I haven't had a whole lot of time, and I did put quite a bit of time in preparing this section, so stick around. Let's talk about the conference finals trophy, the Clarence Campbell Bowl in the West, and the Prince of Wales, Prince of Persia trophy in the East. And whether or not you should touch the trophy. Ooh. Okay, so I've talked about superstitions on this podcast before, and this seems to be the ultimate superstition. And it's a conversation every single year after the conference finals are done, when they're presenting the Prince of Wales trophy or the Campbell Bowl, and I don't know why it's called it's not even shaped like a bowl. They both look like trophies, whatever. But everyone talks about, do you touch the trophy? Do you not touch the trophy? Superstition, bad jujubes, I don't know, right? And I wanted to know, okay, what are the facts here? Has touching the trophy been bad luck? Does it give good luck? Like what is, because I think the superstition here is touching the trophy equals bad luck. So the superstition here is if you touch the trophy, you lose the Stanley Cup final, I guess, or therefore if you don't touch the trophy, then you win the Stanley Cup. I guess that's what the superstition. And in this next section, I am looking at the stats, and my prediction is that it's not going to have any impact because I'm not superstitious at all. Honestly, if you think touching a piece of metal is going to have some impact on the universe and the stars and whatever that causes your team not to win the Stanley Cup, I think it's just dumb. Really, I think that makes no sense. That's exactly like, people believe like their sign, like being a Sagittarius or a Capricorn, like that actually has like the date approximately 8 or 9 months after your parents conceived you has an impact on your personality somehow. Like it's the exact same thing. Like it has nothing to do with it. So here's what I'm looking at. Okay. My goal is to either prove the superstitions wrong or see that, like it's about 50% of the time, because that will tell me there's no correlation between bad luck from touching the Stanley Cup. So I went as far back as YouTube videos would let me. So I went back to 2008, because once I got to 2007, it was kind of tough to find footage of Anaheim and Detroit touching the conference finals trophies. But I managed to get back to 2008, so Detroit and Pittsburgh, and I found some pretty interesting results, okay? And if you are superstitious, this section might make you a little bit less superstitious. So I'm going to look at the winners, and I'm going to look at the losers, and I'm going to look at whether or not they touched the trophy. I went back on YouTube, I looked at all the clips, and here's what we got. So let's take a look at the Stanley Cup winners, the team that would go on to win the Stanley Cup, and whether or not they touched their respected conference final trophy, okay? And now I have this color coded a little bit, okay? If it's coded in green, that means I am correct and I am proving the superstitions wrong, that touching the trophy has zero impact. And if it's in red, it might mean there's something there, I guess. So let's take a look at it year by year. Okay, I'm going like backwards chronological because that's kind of how I like to do things. So last season, the Colorado Avalanche, they were awarded the Campbell Bowl and they touched it. And then they won the Stanley Cup. Holy moly, it worked. No way. You touched the trophy and then you didn't get cursed? No way. Yeah, and guess what? When Tampa won their 2 Stanley Cups, same thing. They touched the trophy, who cares? They touched the trophy and they still won the Stanley Cup. So going into the season, the last 3 Stanley Cup winners touched the conference final trophy. So there you go, their respected conference final trophy. Now the St. Louis Blues chose not to, and they still won the Stanley Cup. So there's our first exception we see there. A team a little bit superstitious, but they still won the Stanley Cup. But the previous 3, it didn't matter. So Washington touched the conference final trophy, and so did Pittsburgh in their 2016 and 2017 Cups. Now what's interesting about Pittsburgh, and you'll see this on the next slide too, when they went to the finals against Detroit in 2008, they did not touch the trophy and then lost to Detroit. So the following season, when they had their rematch against Detroit, Pittsburgh did touch the conference final trophy. You can see that right there on the screen too. And then they won the Stanley Cup. So Pittsburgh kind of became like reverse superstitious. That being superstitious didn't work in 2008. And then the next 3 finals they made, they touched the trophy and they still won the Stanley Cup anyways. So Pittsburgh kind of, and don't forget, Sidney Crosby's a pretty superstitious guy. So maybe that played a part in him changing his mind in 2009. Because he was captain all of those years. He was the one that ultimately made the decision, I guess. Though I'm sure it's something the guys talk about. I'm not sure. Okay, so here's where we get to kind of the weird section of this slide. So Chicago, and this is a dark era for for the Hockey Variety podcast host, because I hate these teams. I hated Chicago. I hated LA. They would just dominate my Sharks all the time. Drove me crazy. And these guys, they were also superstitious, and I guess it worked. So Chicago, LA, and Boston as well. And then Chicago in 2010. So from 2010 to 2015, I don't know why I said it like that. So 6 years, they didn't touch the conference final trophy and still won the Stanley Cup. So we've seen kind of a weird pattern here. And like I said, with Pittsburgh, 2009, they did touch the trophy. And then I got a question mark next to Detroit in 2008 because the footage I found, it was like a really short clip of, who was it? Lindstrom. It kind of looked like he didn't touch it. I think it was kind of implied he didn't touch it. It was only like a few second clip, but it looked more like, no, he didn't touch it. Because like he didn't run up and just grab it. You know, he kind of was like sort of standing behind it still. So I kind of have a feeling that no, he didn't end up touching the trophy. But yeah, kind of a weird pattern. So in the six of the seven most recent Stanley Cups, they touched the trophy and they still won the Stanley Cup. Whereas the previous 6 before that, they didn't touch the trophy and still won. So, you know, from this slide alone, for Stanley Cup winners, it's looking at about 50-50, which tells me there's no correlation. And so far, touching the conference final trophy doesn't have an impact. Now it's the next slide where things get really interesting. Okay, so let's take a look at the Stanley Cup losers since 2008. Okay, so again, going as far back as the 2008 Cup, Detroit over Pittsburgh. And here's where things get really interesting. So my argument here is that not touching the conference final trophy didn't have an impact on you winning the Stanley Cup. Because I'm guessing by being superstitious, you think not touching the conference final trophy will give you magical powers that will result in you winning the Stanley Cup. When in fact, check it out. Okay, all of these losers didn't touch the conference final trophy and still lost. So it just didn't matter. So looking at the slide as a whole, since 2008, only 2 of the Stanley Cup losers touched the conference final trophy. Only 2. And the rest of them didn't. And they still lost. So this pretty much proves that not touching the trophy isn't going to help you. Okay, so let's go one by one here. Tampa, for the 3rd year in a row, in 2022, they touched the trophy. And it makes sense. Because if you really are superstitious, well, you touch it the last 2 times. You won the cup. Might as well touch it the 3rd time. And then they lost to Colorado still. But, you know, if you're really superstitious, I can't really blame Tampa too much. Because it's like, okay, it worked the last few times. And we'll talk about Tampa a little bit more in a bit here. Montreal, in the wacky COVID playoffs, didn't touch the conference final trophy. Still lost. Dallas, in 2020, the even more wacky COVID playoffs, didn't touch the trophy. Tampa did. Dallas still lost. So not touching the trophy didn't help them at all. Boston in 2019. Now let's take a look back here. So Boston in 2011 didn't touch the trophy and won the cup. And in 2019 they didn't touch the trophy again and they still lost. And if you look at 2013, again, they didn't touch the trophy and they still lost. So, you know, I think not touching the trophy helped them in 2011, but then it didn't the next 2 cup finals. Vegas in 2018, and this is interesting because Vegas in 2018 didn't touch the trophy, and then going into this year's Stanley Cup finals, they didn't touch a trophy again. So if they are superstitious, they didn't really learn anything from that. But I'll talk about this year's Stanley Cup finals in a sec here. Nashville 2017 didn't touch the trophy. My San Jose Sharks in 2016 didn't touch the trophy, still lost. Tampa, okay, here's interesting. Tampa in 2015 against Chicago didn't touch the conference final trophy, and then they lost. 2020 comes around, they make the Stanley Cup Finals, they touch a trophy, and then they do it 3 years in a row. So kind of like Pittsburgh, Tampa sort of switched their mindset with the superstition, and it kind of worked out for them. They won 2 out of 3, so okay. I wouldn't say that's enough for any kind of correlation, but if anything, this is telling us that you should touch the trophy. This slide in particular is telling you kind of the opposite. I think if you're gonna be superstitious about anything, you should rush to touch the trophy because it's kind of telling me that might be good luck. New York Rangers 2014 didn't touch a trophy and they lost. Boston 2013 didn't touch the trophy, they lost. New Jersey Devils 2012 didn't touch the trophy, they lost. Vancouver 2011 not touching the trophy didn't help them. The riots in the streets didn't help them either. They didn't win the Stanley Cup. Now Philly in 2010, they touched the trophy and they still lost to Chicago, who did not. So maybe you look at that one year and be like, ooh, 2010, that's the big scary year where the superstitions worked out, I guess. Detroit didn't touch it in 2009. I'm pretty sure they didn't in 2008. Let's take a look. No, they didn't touch it again the second year, but it didn't work out. So no correlation there. And then as I mentioned before, 2008, Pittsburgh didn't touch a trophy. Didn't work out for them. They lost, and then they touched the trophy the next year in 2009. So yeah, there you go. So let's go back to our little this year's Stanley Cup final slide here. So what does this tell us? This tells us there's nothing there, okay? And like I said, if anything, when you look at that list of Stanley Cup losers and whether or not they touch the trophy or not, that should tell you you should touch the trophy. Like, you should be rushing to try, because in my opinion, if I'm going to put on a superstitious lens here, that tells me that it's bad luck if you don't touch the trophy, because so many teams have not touched the trophy and still lost. So yeah, my advice is just touch the trophy, okay? And it came out in an interview recently following Game 6 against Dallas. And Mark Stone said that he didn't touch the trophy. Now I am paraphrasing here. He didn't touch the trophy because some of his teammates, they've been there, and it's the Stanley Cup you should be lifting. It's all about the Stanley Cup, and I get it, but also like, hey, I'm not saying pick up the trophy and do a victory lap and hold it over your head and pass it around and I'm not saying all of that, but you know what? Winning your conference, it is an accomplishment. It's not as big as winning the Stanley Cup, obviously. It's not even close to that, but it is still an accomplishment that I'm not saying you have to go all out and celebrate and plan the parade and all that, put up a banner, but it's something you can hold your head high about, I think there's few teams where making the Stanley Cup Finals alone and then losing, there isn't that many teams where I think that's seen as like a big failure. I think this year, if Vegas doesn't win the Cup, it might be seen as a failure, but I think if Florida doesn't win the Cup, they surpassed expectations, I think. Though it really depends on who you ask, but making the Stanley Cup Finals alone, I think, is an accomplishment. Again, you don't need to plan the parade or anything like that, but I don't think you need to be like superstitious, stone face, right? Pun intended, Mark Stone, right? But anyways, I don't think you have to be so uptight about not touching the trophy, because it is an accomplishment. It is something I think you should be proud about. And it was like my beer league team a couple years ago. Like, we won the regular season because we're awesome, and then we went on to win the playoffs, right? And of course, when we won the playoffs, we lost it, gloves off. Everyone's just hugs, high fives. We took a picture. It was a big deal. And the game before that, we were awarded our regular season trophy, and it was kind of like that. We were happy that we had the trophy, but we weren't going crazy and celebrating and all that. But we were like, hey, okay, it's cool having this. We acknowledged we had a really good regular season, and that was cool. But we knew the next game for us was going to be the playoff finals, and that was the big thing, and that was a totally different moment. And I know that my beer league team is very different from the Stanley Cup playoffs, but you know what? I think that trophy is still something to hold your head high about. I really do. I think it's an accomplishment. It's not even close to the same level as the Stanley Cup, but I don't think you need to be all like uptight about it. Pick up the trophy, okay? Touch the trophy, whatever. Celebrate it with your guys. I'm not saying you have to have like a big massive party, but hey, go into the change room after a game, maybe crack a beer, be like, hey, we did it. You know, we did something big. Let's focus on the big Stanley Cup now, okay? Let's keep this momentum going. Let's keep these good vibes going. So, good job, Sasha Barkov, touching the conference final trophy. Love it. Hometown crowd loved it. Yep. Mark Stone, I don't think it's going to work, man. I don't. But I don't know. Vegas is a really good team. They could still pull it off either way. But yeah, my verdict, touch a trophy. Okay, you don't need to do a big parade about it, but we can see the stats from the last 15 years here that touching or not touching the conference final trophy doesn't really make a difference, but honestly, it might be better luck if you do touch the trophy. And that's it for this episode of the Hockey Variety Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate all of the support. Don't be I said don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to subscribe, okay? Don't be afraid. It's okay. No, if you could subscribe on YouTube, that'd be greatly appreciated. Just so you don't miss an episode. We're sitting at 8 subscribers now. Big milestone. Big milestone. Getting tons of views on that Bedard, the draft lottery reaction video. Makes you think I should do a live reaction to the actual draft as well. Maybe I don't want to do free agent reaction because that's like a whole day thing. But yeah, maybe it's kind of a sign I should do a bit more reaction content. I don't know. We'll see. I definitely want to react to like the first few picks of the draft though. Maybe the first like 5 or so, just so I'm not sitting on my computer the whole time. But yeah, be sure to subscribe on YouTube. We're on Instagram as well. Hockey Variety Podcast on Instagram, all one word. Facebook page as well, Hockey Variety Podcast on Facebook. Be sure to leave a like on today's episode as well. And I'll talk to you when I have some time to do a podcast. This one might not be till the Stanley Cup Finals are done, but I'll try my best. I enjoyed putting this one together. And yeah, thanks for listening.